This is the Out of Bounds Show with Bo Bounds.
Oh, man. Bama dominates. The two heavyweights go head-to-head. Lord Saban was cleared of COVID, and Bama dominates. And it's really amazing to see the way they're playing offense. Our next guest and I grew up watching Bama play offense, and it was like watching paint dry. And, man, what a turnaround with Kiffin and Sarkisian. It's amazing what Saban has allowed them to do, and the receivers and skill talent and obviously offensive line that they have recruited. I do not believe that Mac Jones is Joe Burrow, like some of our listeners on the Mississippi Ag John Deere Tractor text line, but we're going to ask our next guest. College Game Day on ESPN Radio. He is Brad Edwards on the Coors Light guest line. Brad, I think Mac Jones is a nice QB who's doing everything he needs to do well with great personnel around him. Is Mac Jones Joe Burrow?
No, he's not Joe Burrow. He's a pretty good quarterback. I think the places that I would point at to say that he's not Joe Burrow, one is athleticism. Burrow was just he was able, and if you had to watch LSU a lot to be aware of it, but he would just see his opportunities to run when he could. Every now and then they'd call his number, but most of it was just recognizing, hey, defense is just man-to-man, turn tail, running downfield. They've left the whole center open, and I'm just going to take 15 yards here. So Burrow as a runner was much more dangerous than Mac Jones, and so that was part of it, even though it wasn't a big part of LSU's offense. The other thing was really the intermediate passing. So you're looking at, just kind of the 10 to 20-yard downfield area where Burrow made a lot of NFL-type throws in those windows, sideline routes, things like that, where you could just tell, man, this guy's, he's got everything you need to succeed at the next level. Alabama doesn't throw a lot of those. They really just, between their running game and the short passing game, just kind of suck you in and force you to respect that, and then they go over the top. So I would point to those two areas where you don't see Mac Jones doing those things that Burrow did really well. But everything else, look, there's nothing that he does that you can point to and say that he doesn't do it well, and that's why their offense is so explosive.
Did anything surprise you about the way the game unfolded Saturday night?
Yes. Yeah, what surprised me is that Alabama was able to run the ball in Georgia as effectively as they did. I know Alabama's offensive line looks really good in their uniforms, and they're all like 4- and 5-star guys, and on paper they should be dominant. But I had not seen that out of them in the first 3 games, aside from Ole Miss. And Ole Miss's defense is so weak that, you can't read much into that. And I just felt like from what I had seen so far that Bama would struggle to run, and it would be all on Mac Jones. I remember saying that Mac Jones is going to have to throw for 400 yards for them to win, and he did. But I wasn't expecting them to run for another 150-something on top of it. Najee Harris went over 150. I don't know what the team's total was for the game. But that was surprising to me. And look, when you throw the ball the way that they do, and like I said, when you throw the ball downfield the way that they do, to be able to generate that much of a running game, and that's not a ton, but when they have to respect that, there's really no answer for a defense. I mean, you'd much rather let Najee Harris have 150 yards on the ground, give him that. Because the one thing about Harris, as many things there are to like about him, he's not a home run hitter. And you figure even if you give up a big hole at the line of scrimmage and he blows through it at full speed, he's still probably not gaining much more than 15 yards on the play because he just doesn't have top-end speed. So if you're a defense and you're going against Alabama, if you're going to concede something, you concede the run to Najee because that's the least dangerous
No doubt.
of all the things that they do,
Brad Edwards on the Coors Light guest line. You're listening to the Out of Bounds Show. What Georgia is – so this whole Stetson Bennett the fourth thing, it's ridiculous that they're in this kind of situation. Kirby is going to he's going to have to go, in my opinion, the route of Ogeron at some point, where he's got to go find somebody special, like Joe Brady. Do you agree?
Well, I think the point of bringing in Todd Monken was to do that. I mean, you know, if Georgia hadn't already realized it before last year's SEC championship game, they certainly recognized it that day, which is that they were going to have to be a lot more dynamic on offense in order to have a chance to win a national championship. I mean, I know they came really close just 2 years before that, and probably should have, if not for the two off the bench thing. But the way that offenses are today in college football, and look, Saturday was another reminder. You can be great on defense, and I think Georgia is the best defense in the country. But against a really good offense, there's only so much you can do to hold them down. And if Alabama and Georgia play again in the SEC championship game, Kirby already knows right now he's going to have to come close to 40, if not break 40 on the scoreboard to be able to beat that team. And I don't think he has a quarterback on his roster who can do it. I don't know how much better they would have been if Jamie Newman didn't transfer. They would have been better than they were the other night. So, yeah, I think it's more going out and having the right quarterback. You've got to get the right quarterback. I think the coordinator, you've got to get him the guy before you know whether he's doing everything that you need to do to be successful. And so I think the issue is at QB. And as far as it, applies to the rest of this season, like I said, with Georgia, they know that they're going to have to score a lot more points than that to be able to beat Alabama. The question is Stetson Bennett good enough to do that? I don't think he is.
No.
So if I'm Kirby, as difficult as this is, and they have a bye this week, and then they come back. I believe it's Kentucky and Florida the next two games. I would be looking at DeJuan Mathis and JT Daniels in practice and figuring out which one of those guys am I going to get some game reps along with Bennett for the next few weeks. And I've got to figure out if I have someone on my roster who is capable of helping us be more explosive offensively. Because if he has someone, and I've got to believe the fact that he started Mathis in game one, he thought he was that, and I understand why he kind of was forced to stick with Bennett. But after what you saw the other night and recognizing that for Georgia, the way that they recruit and how close they were a few years ago, there's no acceptable result to this season other than winning a national championship. And so even if it means benching a guy who's been a great story and has had some really good games so far, if you realize that someone else is going to give you a better chance to beat Alabama and get into the playoff and ultimately win a playoff game or two, that's the direction you have to go. And so, I mean, this is why coaches get paid a lot of money, because that's a tough decision to make. But to me, if he's still trotting Stetson Bennett out there a month from now, that means that he doesn't have anyone better, and he knows he's not gonna win the national championship.
What'd you make of Ole Miss? 7 turnovers. I guess it's easy on Monday for me to say maybe give John Rice a chance at some point. They had a chance late in the game, 26-21. I thought Arkansas was awful on offense. I mean, Kendall Briles is amazing, but they don't have the personnel. What was your takeaway there, Brad?
Yeah, I think you'd say the same thing about Arkansas there that you'd say about Mississippi State right now. They don't have the personnel to do what the coach wants to do offensively. But, man, what a defensive performance. And really, what a defensive performance this season from Arkansas. It's been incredible. And I'm kind of with you where I thought at one point in the second half that they might go to Plumlee just to try something different because they were still in the game and they still had enough possessions left if they didn't turn it over, to be able to come back and win. And look, and even with what Corral did, they still had the opportunity. Maybe if they end up with 5 turnovers instead of 7, they still might have won that game. But I think what I learned in that second half is that Kiffin believes that Corral is his guy, even if he has a bad game. And I think we've seen enough. That was just that's not something that you would think is going to happen again, right? I mean, we've seen enough good out of him to know that was just a bad day at the office. But the fact that he didn't go to Plumlee tells you that this is the type of offense he's committed to running, and he doesn't want to get away from it. And so that's kind of my takeaway there, which is that he went out and played about as bad of a game as he's capable of playing. Pretty much any quarterback is capable of playing. They let a game get away that they probably should have won. But hey, you know what? They weren't winning a national championship this season anyway. They weren't winning the SEC West. So it's a learning experience in year one under a head coach, and they'll probably all be better off for it in the long run.
I think they beat Auburn this weekend. I think Gus is gone. It's just going to be kind of a long, slow walk off the plank. But I think Ole Miss will take care of Auburn at home this weekend, Brad.
They could. I mean, obviously they got to protect the ball. We saw in the Alabama game, and clearly Auburn's offense is not Alabama's. Both the Alabama and Florida games, that Ole Miss is going to have to play a clean game on offense to be able to score with most teams. Now, Auburn is they're so tough to get a read on right now because they are pretty disjointed offensively. Bo Nix, I don't think has shown much improvement at all from his freshman year. And his freshman year wasn't great. His freshman year was hit or miss. So it seems sometimes like their offense, it's almost like they have four things. One is the running back who I think I think he looks really good and he breaks a lot of tackles, and I think he does a lot of good stuff. Two is Nix running the ball. Three is throw something short to Schwartz and hope that he breaks a tackle and can use his speed. And then four is throw the ball up for grabs down the field to Seth Williams and hope he comes down with it. It's just like a total grab bag offense. And at this point, they're fortunate that they've been able to get 2 wins out of it. Is it grab bag enough to give Ole Miss a chance to hold them in the 30 range? Because if they can, absolutely Ole Miss can win. So I think it's really a matter of, does Auburn do a better job of creating an identity and focusing on the things that they do well and just doing them over and over again? If they do that and it's very predictable, it's probably not going to help them a whole lot later in the schedule, but it should be enough against Ole Miss's defense. So I think that's the big question as far as what you see from them on Saturday.
What do you make? Brad Edwards, College Game Day on ESPN Radio, joining us on the Out of Bounds show. What do you make of Jimbo and Gus regressing on offense as offensive specialists?
Yeah, that's the thing with A&M that's kind of gone unnoticed because of all the excitement over the wins these last 2 weeks with their fan base. So I don't want to say it's completely unnoticed. I'm sure they just haven't complained about it because they're winning. But the passing game, man, I mean, with a senior quarterback who's been there for all this time, I don't know what to make of where they are right now with Kellen Mond. I realize that they lost all their experienced receivers from last year, and then you have a guy who goes out there and has a breakout game against Florida, and then he suffers a season-ending injury, and so they are depleted at receiver. But still, it's kind of hard to process why their passing game wouldn't be better than it is. Auburn's is a different thing. Like I mean, I guess they're similar in some ways, but I look at what Auburn has going on and just the lack of an identity. I mean, like I said earlier, you don't know what Auburn is offensively. For A&M, the one thing at this point is that they're going to try to line up and run over you first and foremost. Now, whether they'll do it is another question, but that's what they want to do. You don't even know what Auburn wants to do when you watch them. And when and look, we all know how Gus is, just they've bounced around and they've had different coordinators, and is Gus calling the plays? Is he not? They're throwing the ball more. The way that they're running this year, even though it is grab bag, it doesn't appear to be what Gus would normally do. So I do think that Chad Morris has a lot more input than Gus has allowed
And
anyone
he's
else
hot
to have
garbage.
before.
He's hot garbage.
Yeah, so I mean that's kind of where we are.
Good. All right, so I think he's gone. So it'll be Billy Napier, Sark, maybe Hugh Freeze. I mean, Hugh Freeze is 5-0 at Liberty. If you can take the baggage, you can say what you want about him, Brad, but the dude can do what you have to do in the game today, which we were just talking about, and that's be a dude on offense and a play caller and coach the quarterback position.
So what's the most important thing at Auburn? And it's not winning a national championship.
Beating Bama.
It's beating Alabama. And Hugh Freeze did it twice.
Mm-hmm. And
the risk you run by the other names that you threw out there who are Saban assistants or former Saban assistants, none of them have beaten him yet. So, and look, we all know at this point Saban's not going to be there for 10 more years. Might not even be there for 5 more years. It's hard to say. But I don't know. I mean, at this stage, rather than go after someone who coached under Saban, I'd go after someone else. And out of someone else's, the only one who's actually had success against Saban, who might be available, would be Freeze.
Freeze, Sark, Billy Napier.
You're not getting Dabo.
No, that's not happening.
No, so I just wonder, like, how many coaches who have good options would take the Auburn job while Saban is still at Alabama.
That's why well, that's a great point. Now, I think Sark would actually take it just because I just do. 5+, 6+ million. He believes what you believe. Hey, if I can weather the storm on Nick Saban for 3 or 4 years, beat him once, whatever. Bring this offense into the 21st century. Hugh would win. Alan Green is the AD at Auburn. I don't know if he'll take the risk or even if the president will sign off on it.
Well, here's another question you got to ask with a Sark or a Napier is, depending on how many years you think Saban has left, do you think you could get the Alabama job when Saban hangs it up? Yeah. Because if you go take the job at Auburn, you are forever scratched off every list for future Alabama head coach.
True.
So
you just made a great point.
To think about.
Yeah, and Bartu thinks Napier to Bama. So, but I don't know how that works for timing because he ain't going to be at La Lafayette in 3 or 4 years.
No,
I guess he'd have to make one more jump somewhere.
Yeah, group of it's our Power Five move, not to a playoff contender, but to somewhere else where you can show that you can recruit at top 25 level.
Yeah. Brad
Stark's already shown that, by the way. He's already shown that he can recruit at a top 25 level when he was at USC.
Right.
Napier hasn't.
Brad Edwards on the Out of Bounds show. Blake, you've got a question.
Yeah, Brad. Given what you saw from Alabama against Georgia, which we thought Georgia was the best defense in the SEC, maybe one of the top in the country. Given what you saw from LSU,
they still are, by the way.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% with you.
You'll see that going forward. They're still really good on defense.
I 100% agree. But this is to my point. They are really good on defense, and yet you saw what happened Saturday. You saw what happened last year when LSU put it together offensively. You've seen the way Clemson has played offense. If you're hiring Auburn, maybe South Carolina this year, maybe Vanderbilt, although that didn't really matter, but just anybody, Texas, explain to me why, when you see what's gone over the last 3 years, you would ever hire somebody who isn't innovative offensively. A Bryles, a Kiffin, a Sarkisian potentially, somebody like that. Why would you ever go down the defensive route as a head coach?
In other words, Pruitt, Smart, and Muschamp don't have that ability. All right, Brad, you got the floor.
Yeah, I think it really is more about who are you going to hire. I mean, if you're not going to be your own play caller, like Leach is, for example, then it's about how do you think about offense? Because, Sam Pittman is a guy you would have looked at and said, oh, offensive line coach, never been a coordinator. I know what this guy's mindset is. He's just going to 3 yards in a cloud of dust. And no, I mean, that's not, I mean, his first thought was, man, I mean, he saw what happened to Georgia last year in the SEC championship game, and he's thinking the same thing you are, which is that, I've got to have someone who knows how to score points, and that's why he goes out and hires Kendall Bryles. And so I don't think it really has as much to do with the background of the head coach as much as the question, what is your offensive philosophy? if you're not going to be the one calling the plays, what kind of guy are you going to look for? And because you have to recognize that if he's really good, he's going to get hired, to go somewhere else. And whether he becomes a head coach or someone else pays him more to be a coordinator at a bigger school. And that's why it has to be a philosophy thing where exactly what type of guy you're looking for to replace him when he leaves, so that you have that constant flow of offensive creativity and all that, because you're right. I mean, that's what it comes down to. In fact, I've been saying for the last day or so that it's kind of anticlimactic because we're sitting here in the middle of October and we already know who 3 of the 4 playoff teams are, because It's Clemson, it's Alabama, and it's Ohio State. And I have no problem saying that before the Big Ten has even played a game, because Ohio State might actually be the best offensive team in the country. I think they might be better than Alabama and Clemson on that side of the ball. And we just know you can't stop an offense that good. The question is when they play each other, who's going to get the service breaks, whether it's forcing turnovers or holding the field goal attempts or whatever it may be. But those 3 offenses right now are at a level above. And here's the thing is, like, as we go forward over the next 6 to 8 weeks or whatever it is, unfortunately for teams like that, it's not so much about are they going to win the game. It's about can they avoid injuries, because if you're Alabama at this point, like, your biggest fear is that either like Waddle or Smith goes down with a season-ending injury, because you're done at that. I mean, you might still be able to win the SEC, but you're not winning the national championship. And obviously, guys like Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, whatever. It's just it's which of those teams can keep their offense, healthy and intact all the way to the playoff. I hope that doesn't end up being what decides it, but that's a big deal as you go into these games is who can avoid getting a key player injured.
We'll leave it there. Brad Edwards, College Game Day on ESPN Radio, joining us on the Coors Light guest line. Yep. All right. We'll leave it there. Brad, appreciate it, buddy. Have a good week.
All right. See you guys.
See you, man. So I love the way he walked us through Alabama and Georgia, Blake, and the fact that, Sark has picked up and done a great job. This is probably it for Sark. All right, so we've got Barry Odom that's going to leave Arkansas. Probably Kendall Briles will leave. That'll decimate them. It's just not realistic to find those 2 guys again for Sam Pittman in Arkansas. But what a ride this year. They're going to win some more games, go to a bowl game. Yeah. Sark will leave. Where does Hugh Freeze go? They're 5-0 at Liberty. He's blew out Syracuse. Billy Napier at La Lafayette. And then Urban Meyer, if he says no to Texas, I would think Sark's in play, Napier's in play, maybe a couple other guys.
Interview has to be depressing if you're an A&M fan.
Yeah.
No offense. You never have a chance.
Hey, hit the podcast on Apple Podcast, and please check out the new and updated Out of Bounds Radio app. Show is brought to you by Went McGee, the mortgage man. He'll shop the best rates for you as you're refinancing your home. Went McGee, the mortgage man.